million that way. And then if we look at what else, arts and sciences, where religious studies exists, what else education, where recreation and sports management is, and what else nursing, where the athletic training program is, where those exist, you see that there's a lot of other activities. So the program closures added up to a little over $1 million, and for these 3 units, with cutting faculty, with eliminating visiting faculty, increasing class sizes, reorganizing programs, doing all of these shifts, shifting to student fees, all that saves $3.5 million for those 3 colleges. And so if we do not close the programs, and if the board would say that we need to maintain the distribution of cuts as they have been laid out, that would mean that these 3 colleges would have to come up with another 30% cut, in essence, with the additional $1 million that we put on them. So those are the sorts of issues that I think you need to be thinking about as you engage in this very important, very critical discussion. As you know, in the resolution in the book is that there's a be it further, there's a resolution to close the programs, and then there's the second one which just says be it further resolved that the board gives the president the authority to alter those resolutions should additional funding become available, so that your action today would not in and of itself require the ultimate demise of the programs. It would be subject to additional funding and the president's decision.
Point of information, Mr. Chair. You'll see under the authority on the background information, the Florida Board of Governors Regulation 8.012, academic program termination, states in part, each university board of trustees has the responsibility and authority to approve termination of degree programs at the bachelor's, master's, and advanced master's and specialist level in accordance with BOG Regulation 8.0121 in subsection 2. Then it states, upon termination of a degree program, the university will notify the Board of Governors, Office of Academic and Student Affairs within 4 weeks of the University Board of Trustees' decision. Does that imply, perhaps we can have our University Council give us an opinion, that any motion to dissolve would basically take effect within 4 weeks, and we wouldn't have the opportunity to raise the funds the trustee Frost has spoken to?
Christina?
Yes, sir. I would say that if this board close these programs with the caveat that if the president wants to come back to the board, we would not notify the BOG right now, but when the president felt that it was a final decision that would not be coming back here, then we would notify the BOG.
Mr. Chairman, if I have a comment. In every one of these programs, we are aggressively looking for other sources of support. I cannot reveal at this point the donors, because I don't want to embarrass the donors if they happen to not come through. In some places, we are going to increase the price of the program by a cost-plus program. In other cases, there are other parts of the university that may want to contribute, which is very important to them. So in all cases, there is a possibility of these programs. That's why we put that caveat in. I'm glad that Christina would have said that, because I certainly would not have been inclined to notify the board, of governors until we ran out of options. The other thing that's very important, if I might just for a minute, Mr. Chairman, this is not an arbitrary decision of the provost, or myself. This is a bottoms-up planning process. The deans all agreed on what were the strategic values of different considerations of programs. Those strategic values were placed on every program. And when the dean did that, not the provost, when the dean did that, and he saw himself as the Dean of Arts and Science, that he had to cut something, this is what the dean offered. If, for any chance, by any chance, you should say, no, we're not going to close that program, the provost and I would go back to the dean and say, what are you going to close? What else are you going to close? So this is not end of story. It's not like you say, yeah, whoopee, we're fine, and everybody's happy, and what happened? We would go back to the dean and say, we still need that $1 million from you. What are you going to cut?
But Mr. President, is it not true that that they don't have to go back if, say, for example, religious studies, is able to raise the money and feels comfortable raising the money. You had indicated that they needed something like $4 or $5 million to keep it going forever, which would be, they'd have to raise like $2 million, $2.5 million for the state.
No. It's
$5.
raise $4 million, we would get 8 at 4% is 320,000.
So is it not
That's
true?
half of the problem.
Yeah, so it is not true that if religious studies and everybody around religious studies feels comfortable, that at least at this time, you're not necessarily having the deans in those schools of arts and
No, we
science
would
have
not
to
go
go
back with
and
the-
say, go and find another $1 million.
The only case in which we would go back to the dean is if you voted not to close this program. Then we'd go back to the dean and say, you were shy $1 million, what else would you close? If you voted to close the program, and I have the authority to come back and say, no, there's these opportunities that we have out there. In fact, we're being more generous than even if you suggested. If at some point I am convinced that I need to have the money in hand, that it can be done, I think I would say, I'd come back to the board
I
and say,
personally know that it can in religious studies, okay?
Okay.
I know it.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, let's start with that.
if I may add to what Trustee Frost has said, I was not able to be in the committee yesterday, but I'm glad that they didn't make that final decision. I appreciate that, Madam Chair. But I think we should at least reconsider the religious studies, whether it's a temporary hiatus and give them the opportunity to raise the funds, or to look at it. And I base that, I see there's not a lot of students, but I base that on what I've learned here from our president and learned from the process of our budget process. That one of the first things we look at is does it fit with our mission, our core mission? And as an international university with a global perspective, I think it does. I think it's the studies of the future. And I think if you're Burger King or McDonald's, you would want your executives, those that are expanding into the international world, to have religious studies. And it fits in perfectly with our business perspective. So everything that Dr. Katz said made a lot of sense to me. So I'm wondering if the proper thing would be for them to also create more awareness so they could increase the students. Because I think maybe it's a little bit kind of a secret. And if people were aware of the religious studies opportunities more, I think they would have more students participating. They realize what a global...
Trustee Quigg, I think the motion before you would accomplish what you would want to accomplish. It says that if we find in the months ahead, myself or President-designate Roosevelt, who takes over, that there is really an opportunity to find private funds, as Trustee Frost says, and also with the help of the Dalai Lama, we would find some other way to do this temporarily until we could raise those funds. So the motion gives the President the opportunity to say, no, we are going to reverse that request to the board, and we will let the program stand. That's the motion that is before you.
Yes, one comment. When the provost spoke, he said that if we could not, if we did not close this program, we would have to go back and ask for, for the other $1 million, which would be another 30% cut in those schools. Would not another way of dealing with this is we have a strategic investment of $17.1 or $2 million. That $1 million is about 7% of that amount, which is that wouldn't radically change our strategic investment and could be a source of at least some funding for the schools. I personally believe that the religious department here and the religious studies is a basic source of the mission of the university, because we are in probably a prototype city of the future in the United States. And I think we need the various religious, understanding the various religions, which, as you know, play a major part in political issues and business issues, etc. I just think that really belongs in this university and this community, and I think we ought to make a major effort to save it.
Thank you,
Yes,
Trustee Alvarez.
excuse me, the chair will recognize speakers, please.